snatch it back and hold it, baby, one more time.
Well, this is a first for me. A company reached out and asked me to do a review. Lucas from Synido offered me a TempoPAD Z1 in exchange for an honest review. At first, I didn't really think it had much to do with guitar playing, but turns out I was wrong about that. Let's find out why. What I learned about this pad before getting one made me think it's marketed mostly for finger drumming, playing loops, and somehow as a lighting effect. It would likely be an overly long video to give a proper tutorial and review of all that this device can do. Instead, I'm going to go quickly over the features that don't hold much appeal for me and focus longer on the features I find valuable. The company was also nice enough to provide a discount code, which is shown here, and I've also put it in the description. The description of this video also has a link to the product. Here's the box that arrived. It was nicely packaged, and this is a sturdy box. Let me open it up. Here's a company that suspects customers aren't going to read manuals, so it immediately lets you see you can connect it to a computer, synth keyboard, or a phone or pad. Under the flap, we have a zippered pouch, an actual printed manual. Maybe they do think you'll read a manual. A USB and Mini 8 to USB cable. The device itself. And an OTG adapter for converting from USB-A to USB-C ports. It's a little over 10 inches wide. A bit over 9 inches high. For the metric fans out there, it's 23 centimeters high and 26 centimeters long. That's about 3/4 of an inch or 1.5 centimeters in height. Since we're getting all physical, I might as well weigh it. 818 grams, and an Imperial, let's call it 1 pound, 13 ounces. There's a switch on the left for turning on and off the reactive light bar. Nothing on the opposite side, nothing on the bottom, and a couple of connections on the top, including the USB-C port, which is all I'm likely to use in this demo. The bottom has nice rubberized pads to keep it in place on smooth surfaces. Let's get plugged in. There is no on-off switch. Plug it in and it powers on. And they are appealing to the drummer in me by defaulting to drum mode. I did review the manual, and it appears to be written or translated by a native English speaker, so they put in a good effort there. As far as manuals go, it's adequate. I could have benefited from a better technical manual writer, but it's still good enough that I figured out the things that were most important to me. Some things didn't even require looking at the manual. In this drum mode, you can see the pad lights up in quadrants. I think that's just to help you visually separate things. I both booted Reaper with a virtual instrument drum track and turned on my MIDI monitor and tapped out a beat. You can see from the MIDI monitor that each tap of the keys sent out some note on and note off data. There were 3 different notes. Note 36 triggered the kick drum, note 68 triggered the hi-hat, and note 40 was the snare. The main 64 pads have no give. They are reasonably hard. There is a little bit of softness to them, and they have a fuzzy nylon feel. They feel pretty good. The control buttons around the perimeter do have give and feel like normal buttons. All of the buttons feel secure and well made. A couple of things I want to point out about the first demo. 1, this device was just sending out MIDI data. It wasn't making drum sounds. The sounds come from the Moto drums on track 1 in Reaper. 2, I have really strong fingers. I maxed out those pads with each hit. Okay, that's not quite true. Turns out the velocity sensitivity was set to only send out the max velocity. We can change that with the function control buttons on the right. Select velocity. Now, the up and down arrows at the top will control the value. As we change the setting, the light bar gives us visual feedback. The manual has nice tables for every setting, so the top value is full constant velocity feedback. 1 step down is exponential. This setting requires the greatest force to achieve a velocity of 127. The middle setting is the default linear feedback. And the lowest setting is called logarithmic and allows the gentlest taps. The transpose button doesn't do anything in drum mode, but the octave button does work. It increases the value of the note sent out by 12, one for each semitone in the octave. We hear the sounds for whatever happens to be on those pads. We can move through the octaves and get varying sounds. The drum mode doesn't allow you to customize the notes sent for each pad. Instead, I went into the Moto drum program and specified what drum should sound for each incoming MIDI note. The transpose feature does work, we just have to switch to the keyboard mode. And to minimize cognitive dissonance, I'll switch Reaper over to a track that has a piano plugin. The pad layout has a new color scheme. It's trying to replicate a keyboard. The bottom row is meant to be the white keys, and the next row up is meant to be the black keys. The keys that aren't lit don't send any values. Each pair of rows goes up by an octave. Notice I hit the last C, the note C in the row above also lights, as it's the same note. Let's try out the transpose feature. Probably the best thing is I'll hit the same note and use the up arrow to go up a semitone so that you can hear it. I can go up 6 semitones and down 6 semitones. And of course the octave key also works. We can go up 3 octaves and down 3. But after going down 1 to C0, there are no more notes mapped in my keyboard plugin. Let's go back to C1 as the lowest note. And here are the 4 octaves. The light button sets the brightness for the key backlighting. It works better than it seems in this video as my camera keeps adjusting for the changing light level. If you want, you can turn off the logo light by holding down the Light and MMC buttons for 2 seconds. I'm just going to leave it on. Speaking of the MMC button, it controls the bottom buttons. When it's lit, it sends the MMC commands for the transport buttons. When it's off, those buttons will send control change MIDI messages. All this is useful and fun, but it's not my favorite thing about this device. That would be the custom mode. I've only had this controller for a day, but this mode has loads of possibilities. Here's the first thing I tried, and I'll show you how I did it in a minute. I programmed just a few of the buttons with different functions and different light colors. The blue ones on the left all send program control messages, and the whitish ones send control change messages. Let me load a new Reaper project so I can show you how I want to use this. I've loaded into this project just 3 of the jam tracks I practice with every day. I'm going to eventually load the rest. I want to point out a couple of things. That's AmpliTube 5 at the bottom of the screen. The first button I'll hit will send the program change message with a data byte of 1 to select the amp I use in AmpliTube for the first jam track. You can see that in the background. I've also set up Reaper to respond to that PC message. It will select the first jam track and solo it. Now I can hit play and the track starts playing. I'll let it go for a few seconds since the song starts with guitar and the jam track doesn't have that part. There we go. I'll stop that. The second button switches to another AT5 setup for the second half of the song, so I'll skip that and go to the third button that sends the program change message with a data byte of 3. In Reaper, you can see it switched to the second song. Again, it's only got a click, then hi-hat at the beginning. You can hear the tempo is different, and you can see the preset changed for AmpliTube. Let me go to the third preset. Oops, I didn't drag in the jam track to the beginning. I'll fix that and hit play. Sidebar. I put the buttons in this configuration because it mimics my pedal board. And speaking of which, my pedal board sends the same PC messages, so I don't know why it didn't occur to me to do this until I got this controller, but it didn't. I cannot send the play command from my pedal board, but I could add play to the Reaper custom action. However, if you don't have a pedal board, and this controller frankly costs less than half of my pedal board, then this could be a nice alternative. While I mostly practice standing up, sometimes I do get tired, and using my hands to do all this then becomes more convenient. End sidebar. Let me go to preset 6 and do a quick demo of the CC buttons. The first one controls the on-off setting on the echo pedal, and you can see the pedal turn off. Let's go over to the computer and see how this is set up. On the Mac, you can get the software directly from the App Store, but I assume on Windows you need the Synido website, which is just synido.com. You'll want to go to support and then downloads. If you click for the Mac, it will launch the App Store and take you to the app, or you could just search in the App Store for Synido TempoPAD. I'll switch over to the App Store so you can see what it looks like. Let me bring up the app. It has two main modes, easy and custom. I have to admit, I find this an odd and somewhat clunky choice for a UI design. Fortunately, it doesn't matter that much which one you pick. Let's go into easy mode, and I'll do a 100 mile per hour review. It has three main submodes. The music editing mode, you can pull in audio files and slice them up and then assign them to pads. I already have two files I brought into the lower area, which is not for editing, but it does allow you to set a file to a pad by dragging. Hit the play button to hear it. You can right-click the pad for other options. I'm just going to delete the file. If I leave this file here, then when I'm in easy mode on the pad, it will play the audio file when I hit that pad. I can also assign a color effect to a pad. I don't want to spend a lot of time here, but you can explore on your own. Just know you can hit save and it puts the lighting effect in the list at the top. You can then drag a lighting effect to a pad as well, and hitting that pad in easy mode both plays the audio and generates the lighting effect. The interface is a little buggy. Sometimes the audio light info shows up in the button, and other times it acts like it hasn't done anything. But when I quit and reopen the app, the drag data is there. This is probably an area they need to work on. The final area is for slicing. I haven't used it, but the idea is you can drag in an audio file, auto slice it up into a desired number of pieces, and then auto assign it to any number of desired pads. I really want to get into the custom mode. For that, I'm using the menu bar, selecting mode switch, and then custom mode. The interface changes over. I think this interface would have been better if everything were just in a separate tab, but that's me. All our pads are on the left. We can edit each pad in the upper right. The middle right allows us to batch assign the type of message we want for a range of contiguous buttons. I've already used this. I first set all the pads to PC by clicking the Apply PC. Then I set a couple of ranges for CC and hit Apply CC. I assume that Apply Both will apply all three types for the values set. I'm not sure who wins when you have overlapping values. You can also set the default type of CC button to either toggle or momentary, but you can also change that later on an individual basis. The bottom right area lets us customize the CC messages used by the transport buttons. There are also two important buttons on the bottom that let us send our changes to the pad or get the current state of the pad. When you want to get the current state, make sure the pad is in custom mode. In the menu bar, there's also a file menu with a save as and open menu items. So we can create any number of these custom layouts and load them to send to the pad. Selecting pads can be a little buggy as well. So as you click each pad, make sure the correct pad number is shown in the upper right. Of course, it's working perfectly now. There it goes. I clicked on pad 13, but it's still on pad 34. Just keep clicking until it changes. Once we select a pad, the number, MIDI channel, and colors for a PC button are editable. The color box to the right will clear the current color. The box to the left lets you set the color. It remembers what was last there, but it also opens a standard Mac color picker so you can make it any color you want. It's just off my recording screen. The only thing I want to say about color is that the pad only supports 128 colors, so I find the crayon box interface useful. With 64 buttons, it's nice to use color to help remember what button does what. You can use the send to hardware button multiple times to see what various colors look like before you commit to editing a bunch of buttons. Let me change the type of some buttons to send notes. I can just enter the start pad as 29, the end pad as 32, and click apply once. The start number was 0, so the C1 note got put out for the first button, and the subsequent buttons were increasing by 1. Be careful when you're using this feature. The first value is the start number for the MIDI message. The next box is the start pad. So I'll set pads 29 to 32 back to their original values. The start value should be 28. Since CC messages are a little different, let's look at one. You get a trigger mode, which you can change. Clicking it toggles between the two values. When you have everything the way you want it, use the Send to Hardware button. Eventually, I'm going to come back here and use some note buttons in custom mode. Another benefit I realized about this pad is that instead of dragging in my 49-key keyboard, which still takes up quite a bit of desk space and requires its own 9-volt adapter, I can just use some buttons here as piano keys and practice with it. I have in the past shown up at coffee shops with drum pads to play percussion or some light drums along with some players. Now, if they have a sound source, I can use that Mini 8 to MIDI cable along with a MIDI cable and take this little 2-pound pad and my fingers and provide a little backing percussion without breaking a sweat or even breaking out a pair of drumsticks. Overall, if any of these use cases appeal to you, I think this pad is a good solution. It retails on Amazon for $120, and I've seen coupons that get that down to $95. You can also try my discount code and see how much that saves you. I think the software could use some improvement, but it's a minor nit because I'm not going to need it that often, and there are simple workarounds for the issues I found. I don't have a lot of experience with MIDI controllers, but this unit seems really well built to me and has a nice feel. If I had to record a drum part, I'm pretty sure I would prefer my V drums. I think getting things like ghost notes with this would be tough, although MIDI being MIDI, it's pretty easy to adjust the velocity afterwards. I don't think most keyboard players are going to find this a substitute for a key-based controller. But again, if you only need something simple, it takes up a lot less room. And I know my little keyboard only sends note messages, so I can do program or control changes with this. I hope you found this helpful. Thanks to Synido for being the first company to ever reach out to me for a review. As nice as that was, I tried not to let it influence me. If you get one of these controllers or even other similar products, leave a comment. Until then, rock in peace.